If we start at the smallest scale, with the Planck constant, we find it is very often linked to 2π. This happens so often in quantum mechanics that a new mathematical symbol was created called h-bar to represent the Planck constant divided by 2π. In this video, instead of making new mathematical symbols, we are going to explain a geometrical process that the maths is based upon. In maths, 2π can represent three things. Number one, it can represent a complete rotation on the complex plane. Number two, it can represent cylindrical symmetry that has line symmetry. And number three, it can represent a two-dimensional aspect of spherical symmetry. I will explain these three different aspects of 2π within one universal process, with the Planck constant being a constant of action in the dynamic geometrical process that we see and feel as the passage of time. In this diagram we have the complex plane with 0 in the center, representing t equals 0. We can think of this as one photon electron coupling, or dipole moment, equals 0, the moment of now, with the positive numbers representing an infinite future and the negative numbers representing an infinite past. There is symmetry between the positive and negative numbers, representing the symmetry between the future and the past, as the future unfolds, with each photon-electron coupling, or dipole moment. This forms CPT symmetry, with symmetry between charge, parity, and time. We have symmetry between matter and antimatter, and because the absorption and emission of light, or photon energy, is spontaneous, there will always be the continuous annihilation of antimatter. In this theory, the antimatter annihilation represents the past, at the smallest scale of a process of continuous energy exchange, with the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics representing the same uncertainty we would have with any future event. In the equation for Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, we find not just energy and time, but also we find 2π, representing cylindrical symmetry. Each rotation of the complex plane forms a new Riemann surface as the future unfolds, photon by photon. This process will form cylindrical symmetry that we can see in this image of a sine wave, forming a vector with line symmetry as the process unfolds. But this is formed by spherical symmetry, with light waves being formed by the wave-particle function, or probability function, in the form of an inverse sphere. In mathematics, a sphere is represented by 4π, and if the equation for Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is reformulated using position and momentum, we have 4π. The interior of a sphere is naturally three-dimensional, giving us the three dimensions of our everyday life. As a process of continuous spherical symmetry forming and breaking, this also gives us a geometrical reason for positive and negative charge, with a concaved inner surface for negative charge and a convex outer surface for positive charge. Therefore, we can have the use of the holographic principle, with the information of our three-dimensional universe encoded on a two-dimensional boundary condition by the movement of positive and negative charge. This whole theory can be explained in just one equation, with energy equals mass, linked to the Lorentz contraction of space and time. The Lorentz contraction represents the time dilation of Einstein's theory of relativity. We have energy slowing up the rate that time flows, as a universal process of energy exchange, or what I like to call continuous creation. The C2 represents the speed of light radiating out in a sphere of electromagnetic radiation from its radius, forming a square of probability. We have to square the probability of the wave function, because the area of the sphere is equal to the square of the radius of the sphere, multiplied by 4π. This simple geometrical process forms the probability and uncertainty of everyday life, and at the smallest scale of the process is represented mathematically by Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. In such a theory, we have an emergent future unfolding photon by photon, with the movement of charge and flow of electromagnetic fields. The brackets in the equation represent a dynamic boundary condition of an individual reference frame, with an arrow of time, or timeline, for each frame of reference. The infinity symbol represents an infinite number of dynamic interactive reference frames that are continuously coming in and out of existence. As a universal process of energy exchange, each individual is in the center of their own reference frame, with a probabilistic, uncertain future unfolding relative to their actions. In such a theory, creation is in the hand and eye of the beholder. There is no objective understanding why the speed of light is a constant in a vacuum and is independent of the motion of the source or the observer. This is very odd. You would expect the speed of light to be relative to the motion of the light source and the observer. If we think of a person observing sunlight or electromagnetic waves of any kind, it is as though their own motion comes to naught, like a jogger running on an imaginary treadmill. Throughout the whole universe, only the speed of light appears to be absolute in this way. There is one way to explain this paradox, and that is if the universe is a continuum of continuous energy exchange, or continuous creation, formed by the spontaneous absorption and emission of light, with an uncertain future unfolding photon by photon relative to the atoms of the periodic table. Light is a wave over a period of time, and the particle or photon nature of light only occurs when light interacts with the electrons of the atoms. When this happens, it forms a new wave function relative to the structure of those atoms. In such a theory, the wave-particle duality of light and matter in the form of electrons are forming a blank canvas that we can interact with, forming the possible into the actual. The speed of light is a constant and independent of the motion of the source or the observer, because the future is unfolding light photon by light photon. Any motion of the light source or the observer will be over a period of time, and both the light source and the observer will remain in the moment of now, in the center of their own reference frame, as a process of continuous energy exchange or continuous creation. This is difficult to comprehend, but if we take a person observing electromagnetic waves in the form of starlight, they are able to look back in time, in all directions, at the beauty of the stars, from the center of their own reference frame. The further out into deep space they look, the further back in time they can see. Therefore, the nearer they look at something, the shorter the time period, and there must be a limit where there is no time relative to the atoms of the periodic table. In this theory, the limit is represented mathematically by Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, with quantum physics representing the mechanics of time as a physical process, with classical physics representing processes over a period of time, as in Newton's differential equations. The main reason why this is so difficult to comprehend is because we are part of the interactive process. The electrical activity in the brain that forms conscious awareness is based on the same universal process of energy exchange, with the continuous flow of ideas and perceptions always being in the moment of now, in the center of their own reference frame. This theory can also give us an objective understanding of why the speed of light is the maximum speed limit of the universe. If the universe is coming into existence photon by photon, with each new photon-electron coupling, or dipole moment, the maximum speed of causality, or cause and effect, the maximum speed at which any two parts of the universe can interact will be the speed of light. In this theory, Newton's apple does not fall to the ground because of the downward force of gravity, but because of the upward momentum of electromagnetic radiation, or light. Gravity is not a real force at all. It is a secondary force to the electromagnetic force. I believe this can be seen in the mathematics, with both the gravitational force and the electromagnetic force having the inverse square law. We have the inverse square law because the surface area of the light sphere increases with the square of the radius. Thus the strength of the gravitational field is inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the source. There is no mysterious action at a distance. The gravitational field will work at the speed of light because it is an integral part of one universal process with the electromagnetic force. We have one universal process that begins with the quantum wave particle function, or probability function of quantum mechanics, expanding out as an inverse sphere, and ends with the inverse square law of gravity and Newton's third law of motion. To every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Gravity is the opposite reaction to the atoms radiating quantized spherical wavefronts of electromagnetic radiation. We have one interactive, universal process, continuously unfolding at the quantum level of the atoms. We see and feel this process as time, as a physical process of continuous energy exchange that is formed light-photon oscillation by light-photon oscillation. Objects form their own time by slowing up the rate that time flows, relative to their energy and momentum. In this theory, mass is a byproduct of time dilation. When time slows down, it takes more effort to move an object from A to B, and this is seen as an increase in mass. Also, Einstein's equivalence principle between gravity and acceleration falls out of this theory. Because energy and momentum have to increase for an object to accelerate, time dilation will increase relative to the acceleration. Therefore we have the equivalence principle between gravity and acceleration. This will be felt as inertia in the direction of the acceleration. This theory takes the dynamic interactive process of the general theory of relativity and extends it to our everyday life, explaining a universe that is continuously coming into existence relative to the energy and momentum of our own actions. Every individual is a part of this interactive process that forms the uncertainty and probability that is needed for the great game of life. Thanks for watching. Please share and sub. It will help the promotion of this theory.